All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session from the Data Stack Summit. We're excited to be here at this event today. My name is Nicole Radziwill. I'm the SVP and Chief Data Scientist from a company called Ultranauts. It's a professional services firm, and we have a data quality engineering practice. I've been involved with this sort of work for quite a long time, since the mid-90s, and we're here today with Sunny and Jess and Sangeeta. And we'd all like to thank Mike and Andrew and Solution Monday for setting up this event. We're really excited to be talking about self-service analytics, the good, the bad, and the whatever else comes up. So what I'd like to do first is go around so that each of us can provide an introduction. And we're going to start with you, Sunny. So as we go around, I'd also like to ask if you could share with us, from your perspective, what is self-service analytics, and what's the purpose? Why do we go down that road? So Sunny, tell us about yourself and help us understand self-service analytics.
Yes, thank you, Nicole. And so good to be here today talking about this like a topic spot onto my heart. I'm a strong believer for self-service. And a little bit introduction about myself is I've been a data practitioner for almost a decade. I really enjoy being the bridge between data and people. Lucky to have diversified experience in e-commerce, retail, finance, advertising, fintech. I'm currently leading the analytics team at Indeed, focused on ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance. So whenever I think about self-service, there's few pieces to the puzzle come to in my mind. Is one is those beautiful visualization. People thinking, okay, you're gonna talk about a dashboard, a visualization. I'm gonna poke around, scratch my head, understand which line stands for, and answer my question. I think that's definitely one portion, visualization, how to operationalize and help the business answer most of the question. The second piece to the puzzle come to my mind is just give you the data. Because a lot of time, what people want is not a dashboard, it's just the data. And then they can do whatever they want in the format works for them for, expedite the decisions. I think the main reason this self-service is to the bottom of my heart is when I think about the data analytics function, I feel the main focus and the ROI of this team is just facilitate decision making. And that might mean three areas, exploring new opportunity, try to help the company has discerning what is the right problem or challenge to solve. This too, hard to automate and shouldn't be self-service. That's the fun problem for data people to explore. But the third area, of expedite operational efficiency, that's where I see a lot of opportunity for self-service across team, across business unit.
That sounds great. And Sunny, thank you so much for kicking us off there. Jess, how about you? What do you think?
Hi guys, I'm Jess, and just introduce myself a little bit. I'm a senior data analyst at Crunchbase, and I'm also a LinkedIn learning instructor. So self-service analytics is super important to me because I really believe in democratizing data, making it accessible and available to everyone, even if they are in a non-technical role or come from a non-technical background. So the education side of analytics is something really close to my heart. And self-service analytics is giving the user, which is usually a business person, many times non-technical, the power to make their own decisions with the data and to do what they want with the data. So a lot of times I've seen analytics teams just make a bunch of dashboards, but they don't really do anything for the end user, and they're not able to use those dashboards to actually make decisions. And I've also seen dashboards and metrics that were maybe too confusing or too complicated. The end user didn't understand what they meant. So self-service analytics is, in my opinion, the way to translate the data to the user and then alleviate some of the work off the analytics team, because now the user is educated and empowered to use the analytics on their own, and they don't have to be fully dependent on an analytics team.
Excellent. And Sangeeta, how about you?
Hi, everyone. I'll quickly introduce myself. Sangeeta Krishnan. I've been doing data kind of work for lot of years now. My background is software development, and then I moved more into data. Worked in companies of all sizes, Fortune 500 to something in between, not-for-profit, everything. And I really enjoy leading analytics solution. Currently, I work as a senior analytics lead at Bayer, which is one of my recent jobs. Other than that, I'm going to kick it off by saying, I consider self-service analytics as compare it to baking, right? It's not like one size fits all. For some people, baking could be like, let me collect all the ingredients I'll do from scratch. For somebody else, it's from a box. It's somewhat half done, and I want to do something on top of it. A box mix is what is my baking level ever going to be. For some other people, it is not even that. I just want to go to the bakery and get it, and I'll just do the icing part. I'll just do the decoration. So I see self-service in a similar way. It's no one size fits all. For some people, when you talk to them, they want access to the data. They would like to connect to the database itself and try to pull something, do something. For some people, it's just about web editing. Like there is a kind of a dashboard built for them. They are happy with everything they see. They'll go and edit it. For somebody else, they're from a data literacy perspective, they are not even there yet, and they don't want to get their hands dirty. They just are okay with what you're given. They would rather work with a development team, which in their mind is still self-service. They're sitting next to somebody, but somebody else is building it for them. So it's like at least three ways I see self-service. And I would say there is some struggle to have it like 100% self-service without a clear definition. And this definition could vary from organization to organization as well.
I'm really glad you said that, Sangeeta, because when I think about things that sound really inspiring, like democratizing data and providing access to everyone, having gone through this experience a few times in the past, you realize just how difficult achieving those visions can be. So that's going to lead us to one of the first questions that I want to talk about with each of you, and that is, what is enabling the end user really mean to you? And the reason why this is important is that when we provide access to the data or the products, the visualizations, the dashboards, there's a risk of ending up in a situation where there's so much proliferation of products that you have a trash boards situation, or by attempting to be everything for everybody, you end up being nothing to no one. So what does enabling the end user really mean to you? Let's start with you, Sunny.
Yeah, I think, Nicole, that's such a great call out and a really important question to think, because a lot of time when me and my team deep feeling is like, we got to ask for something, but we don't know the end use. I feel afraid. It's like, okay, how are you going to manipulate my data, my analysis to go something else? So when I think about enable the end user, I always think about 80 and 20% rule, because I'm a strong believer is we cannot hire 100 analysts to solve 100 business challenge. That's not effective. So for 80% of our day-to-day business, we try to like a business decision we try to answer, those can be automated. But there's a 20% questions, needs alignment across the team, needs like a rigorous screening on, what does the data really mean? But granted, if we take a step back for that, there's more we can talk, Nicole, is about the data governance, standardized data metrics, have a centralized like a data logs, a lot of fundamental infrastructure need to support in order to make sure the whole team got alignment and on the right track there. But I think what self-service means to me is I want to empower all the business units operate and automate 80% of their day-to-day decision they need to make with data. And I really like the energy, Sangeeta mentioned about the baking part. I have a similar energy too, which I usually talk about with my stakeholders is all your needs is different. We will meet you where you are, but think about your desire for data or your desire for insights is like you dining out for breakfast. Everyone like curated fancy breakfast. I love dim sum, traditional Chinese like a breakfast, but we cannot dine out every single day. That's so expensive and not necessary. There's many days we get our milk, we get our cereal and fruits. We do what we want with it. So that's the same thing. I want my partner thinking about self-analytics too.
And I'm glad you brought up the 80% thing too. I use something similar. I use 86-10-4, which is designed for the 86. Just make sure that 4% of people who really can do amazing things on their own, just make sure you don't get in their way. So I appreciated the hearing about the 80% from you. How about you, Jess? What does enabling the end user mean to you?
I've never heard of the 80-20 rule before, but I think that's a really interesting concept. I think there's a balance between giving the users all the data and, kind of holding some back, because if you just have it like a vending machine and they can go and get what they want at any time, they might not have the data literacy or the knowledge of what's going on under the hood to know what they're working with. And I've seen this too, when different teams have different data marts and environments, they have their own logic going into the data. It's not always consistent across the board. And I think that can make it even more confusing for stakeholders when things aren't defined consistently across the organization. So I think it's good to be somewhat restrictive with certain projects or business questions, but it's good to give users access to the simpler tasks and repetitive tasks if there are data points that are consistent across the organization and it's something that comes up all the time. Most users are going to be able to filter and get the data they need from the dashboards. But if it's a more complex business question, I think it's good to hold some of that data back and make sure you're not taking the data analysts out of the equation, because they're the ones that are going to understand the business requirements and the stakeholders' needs and interpret that into the data and the analysis and then interpret it back to the stakeholder. So I do think the data analyst is a really key person in that process, because they have the business insight and the data skills to make that translation happen. But it's good to empower the end users with things that they are knowledgeable about and educated on. And I think it really helps as well when there's clear documentation. I think it's great to put a few notes on a dashboard, a few definitions, maybe a link to not even a full data dictionary, because a lot of stakeholders don't want to see a data dictionary, but just like a basic glossary of what the terms mean and how they're defined. So I think transparency with the definitions are an essential piece as well.
Yeah, really shrinking that time it takes to know some data is important. I've found the same thing, that data dictionary is sometimes valuable, sometimes not valuable. It depends on, exactly how they're carried out, exactly what your catalog looks like. But one of the things that resonated with me was you alluded to the fact that not all data is created equal. Some data is going to have a lot more business value than other data. And so being aware of that, which is something that data analysts can and should do, being aware of that is pretty critical. And you can also apply the 80-20 principle to that too, because 20% of your data is probably going to carry 80% of your business value and impact. So, how do you identify that? Sangeeta, how about you? What does enabling the end user mean to you when it comes to analytics?
I'm also going to start with the 80-20, what Sunny and everybody was mentioning. But my 80-20 is slightly a different dimension to it. I would say sometimes enabling self-service doesn't mean like, oh, let's just enable all your user set or for every scenario. 80% you will build standardized dashboards, which could answer most of the things, which is standard across, filter, do whatever on it. And then 20% of the answers you cannot find with whatever you have standardized dashboard. For that 20%, you have to still enable, because otherwise you will end up building too many ad hoc reports, which is not very efficient use of time of developer capacity or whatnot. So that remaining 20%, you will enable self-service for end users. By enabling, there is one more challenge, meaning like, think of it like you go to a store and there is a self-checkout, right? So, it's still, people struggle no matter what. We all have had it, like this item I cannot scan. So enabling doesn't mean I just let it go. Like I enabled you, I empowered you, and you're on your own. that doesn't work like that. You have to have like governance on it. Like, although I enabled you, I still have to monitor what you build. And that is where the balance comes in. Everything you build, if I'm going to monitor it, I would rather build it for you, right? But at the same time, I have to have enough governance so that it doesn't become like people are going and building whatever they like, and then it becomes a problem that we cannot manage it anymore. So that is enabling to me. And it's also based on the organization, the data literacy part of it, of an organization. This is very close to my heart, I would say. I have even written a book on like not just data literacy, on many different things, which released recently. So that's something I've done a lot of work in that area, researching and figuring out. So that's something very close to me.
Yeah, and the governance issue is so important. Yeah, I've seen so many organizations attempt self-service analytics over the years, and most of them, to be quite frank, have not really succeeded in getting to their aspirations. And the number one reason is that governance isn't really as popular. It's not as easy to fund. It's not as exciting. It's not as easy to demonstrate the value, but it is the thing that leads to success or not success, unfortunately, more often. Let's shift a little bit. This is going to take one of the threads that a couple of you started already, which is the theme of empowering the end user. So when we empower these end users, it provides benefits for the people and for the organizations. And one of the ones you hear often is freeing up resources, mostly IT resources or business intelligence resources, freeing them up so they can do more complex, more fun, to be honest, things. So do you find that to be true, or what other benefits have you found? What other ways to empower and consequences have you found? Let's start with Jess. Jess, what do you think?
Yeah, so I have seen kind of contrasting situations with this question. I've been on a team where it was kind of like stakeholders could go to like McDonald's and place their order, boop, 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 here's your report. And the analytics team was just very driven by all of the requests coming in. And it was just ad hoc requests, one after another. And we barely had the time to do maintenance on our data models and our dashboards, and developing new metrics and analyses was unattainable at times because we didn't have the bandwidth and the time. And then I've also been on the other end where we operate on very strict sprints, and we do like a vetting process for every ticket that comes in. So I think that there's definitely a balance with this. And when all of an analyst's time is put into ad hoc requests that you don't necessarily need an analyst to do, I think it takes away from what analysts can do. They can't reach their full potential when they're exporting to Excel all the time. So I think a really big piece of self-service analytics is those quick and fairly easy tasks. Having the end users do those really frees up the analyst to be able to do more complex things. And I think that gives back to the business a lot, because you don't necessarily want to be paying an analyst salary or like an engineer's salary to do simple making a table and exporting to Excel. So self-service analytics is really important to free up the data analysts and give them more time back so they can develop more advanced analyses and insights to make decisions for the business going forward.
Yeah, one of the things that's been frustrating for me is that as you free up the time of your IT people and your data people and your software people, the number of times I've heard somebody say, oh, but it's just easier to ask instead of to go get it myself. And, we still got to deal with human nature, which is, unfortunate, but I guess also fortunate because we're all humans and we're still here doing this sort of thing. Sangeeta, how about you? What do you think about empowerment and the promise of freeing up more resources for the organization?
I would pick on two items. One is innovation, right? Because you're freeing up the time. So whatever those people were building, which could be easily built as a self-service, so now they can innovate better. So that definitely, at the end of the day, there is ROI because of that, because they can do something more creative and more something beneficial to the company. That's one aspect. And the other thing I see as a benefit, which is not many times understood or acknowledged even, is when end users are given this empowerment, it is like many times when technical teams are building, no matter how much the collaboration is with the stakeholders, it is from a technical point of view. If you give access, like the empowerment and the access to build from a business user standpoint or from everybody in the company, self-service becomes a norm. You see handling of the problem solving from a different dimension. So that brings diverse way of looking at a solution, or even dissecting your data, something which some other person would not have seen. So that kind of brings like a very different perspective. Oh, we could have looked at this data from this angle, because in self-service, they may try to have the curiosity in an area which the technical teams missed because of who they are, the different personality. I'm all for like diverse thinking when it comes to problem solving. So that's the key area I see as something beneficial.
Jess, did you have anything that, or excuse me, Sunny, did you have anything that you wanted to add to this since you haven't gotten in on this one yet?
Yes, thank you, Nicole. I really love those discussion, and I want to piggyback to what you say and what Sangeeta and Jess mentioned is when we think about the end user for empowering, like Nicole, you mentioned is just one benefit is just don't get in the way, let some people have the magic sauce to what they believe. And then Jess mentioned is about from the analyst perspective, no one want to be a reporting machine. We want to be the analytics people, influence business decision in the right way. And Sangeeta mentioned a really core concepts is not easy and is not the same for everyone when they think about self-service. To be honest, I feel this is really complicated situation because the thing is self-service itself evolve over time. What do we think self-service now for this team at this moment? It can change completely after a quarter, 2 quarters, or a year when we talk to them again. So one thing I add up to do that is because I was hesitating, it's really gonna free up the time, or what is the purpose for free up the time? Because sometimes I think for some team, they should, they are too rushed to get in the self-service. So they have the issue Sangeeta mentioned is there's no deep connection or understanding about what the business needs. They thought what they need, but the analyst is not there to help solve the problem together. And then there's other scenario is they really need self-service because analysts want to drive the strategy, want to drive the discovery. They don't want to do ad hoc reporting. So it's always a balance. And to Nicole, your point is, whenever you're free time, there might be new priorities coming in. So I think as a team together, have the right question, why we need to free up time. We want the time to solve what problem and have a framework to recess, recalibrate what the definition is, what's the goal we try to achieve across the org for self-service is really important here.
Yeah, absolutely. Setting up any new initiative in a way that you can establish that expectation of continuous improvement and that you can set people's expectations that, yeah, we will be in a continuous improvement cycle. That can be good too, because then people aren't disappointed if they don't see what they want in the final results. So that leads me to the last thing that we're going to touch on today, which is, and we've all kind of touched on this, we've all alluded to this, in that getting 100% self-service analytics in an organization might be out of reach. It's probably unrealistic for most organizations, and yet we still hear that theme. It's still a really enticing aspiration thing we want to get to. So if you were to give executives just one piece of information, one piece of advice that's beyond the, hey, let's use the Pareto principle, let's use 80-20 to pick the most important data, and let's just implement self-service on the things that are the most essential, the most sufficient. What do you think would be that one piece of advice that you'd like to leave an executive or maybe even a CFO with? Who wants to go first on this one? This might take a little thinking.
I can go first, jump in here quickly, because I think as I mentioned earlier is we cannot solve, hire 100 analysts to solve 100 problems. The CFO will kill us. There's no budget or financial sustainability there. And I feel if I have to give one advice or feedback for the leadership there is, it's so important to align data strategy to business strategy. And our goal is make data be a strategic asset. And we need the company to work together. To your point, Nico, is what are the areas we should automate right now to really bring up the operational efficiency? And what are those areas has a lot of uncertainty? We keep coming back and reassess, the self-service opportunity there. That would be where I start with, and always linking the strategy together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Jess, Sangeeta, who would like to chime in next?
I can go next.
Sangeeta, okay.
In my opinion, the one thought I would like to mention to the leadership, whoever is rolling out self-service, is don't roll out self-service as like an objective for the entire company. That doesn't work because everybody's skill set, every team, depending on how big the organization is, may be different. So the best approach would be to pick and choose. Like maybe there is some team which is more on the data maturity curve. They understand data better. They are more tech savvy or whatever is needed to do self-service, a successful story. And then try to use that as an example so that you can bring along more teams. So that is something many times I've noticed, like that is not the message. It is more like, let's roll out self-service across. I would say pick and choose which teams and prioritize, and then have that as your success story to kind of say, hey, look, by doing this team celebrate your small wins, like even a smallest thing they would have accomplished on their own, publicize it, and then have that as a buy-in for the other teams to follow that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. A great way to get buy-in is to make people jealous of what other groups have been able to achieve. And
that's
get
what we are
recognized more.
trying.
Yeah, for sure. Jess, anything you wanted to add here to this one?
Yeah, I think those were great points. I think one thing I would add that hasn't been said is provide plenty of training and education. So make sure all of the data and the processes of how to use the data are well documented. And also just kind of being an ally as an analyst. So be friends with the stakeholders. Don't create an us versus them mentality with them. Be sure that you're there to help if they need it. If they are trying to self-serve, definitely recognize that they're trying to put in the effort and be there to help if they need it, and be willing to give them additional training. And I think that helps the stakeholders build confidence who maybe aren't super technical and don't have a lot of confidence in data literacy. So I think even if you just take baby steps like that, a lot of users will be able to mostly self-serve themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sangeeta, you mentioned earlier that also the need for data literacy. And, I used to teach statistics and data science to college students for about 10 years. And I can't tell you how frustrating it is to see, people confuse bar plots with histograms and to, give those 3D pie charts that don't make any sense and don't really represent the data well. What would you say if you, Sangeeta, were to pick one thing to train people to make them more data literate based on your experience in writing? What would that be? So I think that'd be a great way to close out our session today.
I would pick this topic, financial literacy. It's pretty much taught in school, right? But the working age people were not really had formal training in data literacy. So you have to kind of see that rather than pushing like, oh, data driven is our culture. That's great, but that didn't happen. So you have to kind of get them some basic understanding. And as with the language, there is different proficiency, right? Not everybody can read and write the same way. The complexity also, you're not training everybody to write poetry, right? It's the same way with the data. So I would say I would start off with like the aspect where if you show like a visual, does the group of people, if you have 30 people in your room, do they all walk out with the same idea? That is my first when I talk about literacy, because if all out of those 30 people, only 5 people understand what you're saying, you're very far from literacy, from even reading it. Then we will worry about how you can write, which is in data terms, it would be like, and I build my own stuff. So that is my thought about evolving in the data literacy journey.
What a fantastic way to end, because we we honed in on two themes this whole time. And, one of them was apply 80-20 wherever you can. And the other one was the importance of building shared understanding between the analysts and the stakeholders and the business and the data organization. So thank you so much for this discussion. This has been fun. I hope the people who have attended this session have gotten a lot out of it. And again, thanks to Mike and Andrew and Solution Monday for putting this all together. We appreciate it.